Hello, Juanita. How are you? This is Dr. Duma. We are creating this space for Grace, which is an international website about cancer education. There's a lot of education out there, but we want to make sure our patients have education that is first understandable and second accessible. So I'm so happy to be able to interact with you online. We have met in person before,
Yes.
and we have chatted. So I would like just to see who's Juanita. I keep telling people that you're so amazing. So it would be great that other patients can get to know you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Doc, for this opportunity. I am really grateful. I am really honored. Um, it's a pleasure. I love sharing my story because I feel that my story could help many out there, give them hope, give them inspiration. So, like you introduced me, my name is Juanita Segura. I live in the state of Indiana. I live in a small city called East Chicago, Indiana. And it was named East Chicago because Chicago is like right next door. It's my city. So I'm not too far from Chicago, from the border between Illinois and Indiana. So I am a mother of five and now a grandmother of one. And this journey with lung cancer began November 20th of 2014. So I just celebrated my 5-year cancerversary, and I did it graciously and beautifully at my church by giving my testimony at my church. And so on that day, 5 years ago, I was given the dreadful news that I had stage 3B lung cancer. Prior to that, my symptoms they began in June of 2014. I had just started working a part time job, and I started with, in June, wheezing. And I couldn't understand where the wheezing was coming from because I don't have asthma. So I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe it's allergies. So I saw my doctor, she gave me an inhaler. So I used the inhaler from June all the way up to like August. And then towards the end of August, mid August, I developed a horrible cough. So I went to go see my doctor. Oh, and then the wheezing got worse. I went to go see my doctor September 9th of that year. And she's like, oh, poor dear, you're wheezing. You sound horrible. You have this horrible asthma. And I'm like, Doc, I don't have asthma. She's like, oh, honey, but you have it. Here you go. And she gave me every medication for asthma. And so I was taking it. Nothing was working. During that time, I was a huge CrossFitter. I mean, I was in the best shape of my life. I was eating healthy. I was working out. I was lifting weights. I was lifting heavier than men at my age. At that time, when I was diagnosed, I was 46 years old. So at that age, I was back squatting heavier than my boys. And, at that time, my boys were teenagers and they lift heavy. I mean, I was a beast. And so I felt good. I looked good. Um, I was so healthy. So then, when I was getting sick, I just didn't understand where all this was coming from. So the cough didn't go away. The asthma medication didn't work. So I went to go see a pulmonary specialist. And
Okay.
of course, he switched my medication. But, I always share this part of the story when I went to go see him. I'll never forget that he kept staring at my x-ray. And I was talking to him and I go, Doc, why do you keep staring at my x-ray? What's going on? He goes, the right side, I'm looking at your x-ray. The right side just doesn't seem right. It's like a little enlarged, like inflamed. He says, but I'm going to switch your medication and hopefully you feel better. And if you don't, I want to see you in a week. Well, I didn't even
Okay.
make it to a week. So I went from, okay, I went, got this new medication to Saturday. I had to go do something for my job. I had to go to a place I don't even remember what it was, to be honest, but I had a table and just to give information about my job. And I remember just coughing, coughing, coughing so much. The medication wasn't working, and people did not want to come to my table because they thought I had the flu or I was sick. And
Oh,
so, yes, it was kind of sad. No one came to visit me because I was coughing like crazy. So then I remember that Sunday, not feeling good. I told my husband maybe I should just go to the ER, and I did it. So I just rested. Monday I went to work, and now mind you, I was coaching a 5 a.m. class. I had to cancel that class because I was really, really sick. It just was getting. It was like after I saw the pulmonary specialist, it just started getting worse, the symptoms. So then that Monday I went to work, and I remember waking up, and then I started getting tightness in my chest. Then I was like shortness of breath. I was like, like I couldn't, and I'm like, oh no, 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 there's something wrong with me. So I go to work. I remember getting up, going to the bathroom, and holding on to the wall. Well, I guess a coworker saw me that I wasn't well, went and told my boss at the time.
oh,
And my boss was like, you know, Juanita, get your coat and leave and go straight to the ER. You've been sick long enough. I picked up my husband and I went. When they finally called me in, they asked me all these questions. And so I thought it was a dog. I had a dog. They're like, no. Then I mentioned that I was bird sitting, and they thought it was the bird. I didn't know that a tropical bird could cause like fungus in your lung, infection. I didn't know none of that. So my husband, of course, Googled it, and sure enough, it came up. So then they did all the testing for that, and everything came back negative. So at this point, I said, okay, you know what? We need a CT scan. And the ER doctor said, yes, your doctor just ordered it. Went, came back, and then I waited for them to come back. The ER doctor says, okay, we're going to admit you. And I'm like, why? He said, because it seems like you have pneumonia. There's fluid in your lung. I said, well, if I had pneumonia, I said, I would have had it back in August, September when I was coughing. We're in November. I said, I would have been dead already. So after that, they admitted me. My pulmonary doctor came to see me later that evening. He brought a monitor. He showed me my lung, and he showed me where it was closed because he said I had one of my lymph nodes was enlarged and it was blocking the airway. So then he explained to me that he was going to do a bronchoscopy, and from the bronchoscopy, of course, they're going to take samples. Right there, I knew it was bad. I started to panic. Of course, I called my husband crying. He said, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. You're panicking, yada, yada. So the next morning, I went for the bronchoscopy. I didn't get my results for 2 days later, which was November 20th. And I'll never forget that day. He came in and he brought a nurse with him, and they closed the door. I had a bad feeling. But my husband saw it differently because he walked in and he had a smile on his face. And so my husband says, oh, you're smiling. You must have good news. And he's like, I'm sorry. He went from smiling to a frown. He goes, no, I'm sorry. He said, I don't have good news. It came back. It was positive, tested positive for malignant. And my heart, I remember that day, it was racing so fast. I went completely numb. And I remember um, telling him, okay, I need something. I'm about to have a full blown panic attack. So after he explained everything to us, he said radiation oncologist was going to come talk to us. He was going to send an oncologist. But at that point, we wanted someone that specialized in lung cancer. But before we found that it was lung cancer, we were ignorant and naive. We didn't know, okay, it was cancer, but what, so I'm like, what kind? So my husband asked, well, what kind of cancer? He goes, lung. That's when it really blew my mind. I'm like, lung? And I remember telling him, dude, I don't even smoke. He says, you have non-smokers. And so he explained that at the time, he was explaining the non-small cell, the adenocarcinoma, all that. I wasn't even listening. I didn't know. It was just going in through one ear, coming out the other. Um, so we weren't, we didn't know anything about lung cancer. So my husband knew he had to do his homework. I was so depressed and such in shock that I just really went into a deep depression. I was so sad that the little bit that I did look online after I came home, it was so depressing. I didn't want to look up anything that had to do with lung cancer because everything was so bad. The 5-year survival rate at that time was only, I think, 10%. Um, people didn't make it past certain time. I didn't want to read that. I was trying to focus on survivorship, on living to see my kids grow and see milestones.